Hi there, this is Tony from pianotone.ca. I've owned a Casio PX-S1100 digital piano for about 4 months now, and I just wanted to make a quick video to talk about what I like and what I don't. So let's check it out. Okay, what I like. Action. I love this action. This is by far my favorite piano action out of all of the fully weighted pianos that I've owned, rented, or reviewed. That includes the Roland FP30 and the Yamaha P125 that I owned, as well as some less expensive entry-level digital pianos that I've done reviews on. The action is fully weighted and graded, but it's on a little bit on the lighter side, which lends itself well to playing faster like rock piano passages like 50s piano, Jerry Lee Lewis, boogie woogie, that kind of stuff, as well as other voices like electric pianos and organs. It also has an awesome matte finish on the keys, which I much prefer over plain smooth, shiny keys. Sounds. The 1100 only has 18 sounds, but it's mostly a really good selection of bread and butter piano, electric piano, organ, strings, and bass. The only thing noticeably missing, in my opinion, is a pad sound, which I personally prefer over strings for layering with piano for ballads and that type of thing. But the strings are fine, and I have played around with using some e-piano sounds as pads with some octave shifting and had some kind of cool results with those. As I said, the strings are okay, but after having reviewed and owned multiple Casios and Yamahas, I have to admit that Yamaha strings patches, for some reason, at least to me, always seem to have a bit more of a natural attack and a decay than the Casio's ones. The volume knob. Sounds kind of silly to say, I know, but I love the volume knob. It's so easy to make minute adjustments with that. The Roland FP series has these up and down volume buttons, which I found on my FP30 to be pretty frustrating in that regard. And the Yamaha P125 has a slider, which is better than the volume buttons, but it's still not as nice as the volume knob on the Privia PX series. The fact that it has left-right line out ports is awesome, and that you can record audio direct to a flash drive is also awesome, although there is a bit of an issue with that I'll talk about when I get to the negatives. The portability. I haven't moved it around much yet, but it is so slim, narrow, and light, and the fact that it runs on batteries makes it crazy portable. Okay, so what I don't like. The user interface, or lack thereof. I've never been a huge fan of having to look up in the manual or memorize key combinations to change settings or choose voices, but I have to admit, after having now bought, sold, and rented so many different keyboards, that I think I might be approaching done with any keyboard that doesn't at least have a built-in menu screen. With the 1100, since it doesn't have many voices and I only regularly use about 6 or 7 of them, that's not too bad to memorize. But for things like layering voices, which I do a lot of, but then especially for further editing, like adjusting relative layer volumes, which is actually super important, or octave shifting layers, etc., that starts to get pretty clunky to do with key combinations. And since the 1100 has so many settings that you can choose, like ways to modify your sounds with effects combinations and the acoustic simulator for piano sounds, this piano really is desperately in need of even a simple menu screen and a few more buttons. So as far as changing settings goes, you're probably saying, why not just use the Cordana Play for Piano app? Well, I have mixed opinions on that app. Yes, it does give you a nice graphical user interface where you can choose voices, adjust layers, and adjust settings nice and easily. The negatives about this app after having used it for a while, in my opinion, are it seems to be really laggy, and it often does some strange random things like switch my voices on me or my settings. A couple of times I even had it give me a lower voice in the left-hand layer, or sorry, not the layer, the split, that was something other than the bass guitar, which actually isn't even supposed to be possible. I ended up with an organ in the left hand once, and I'm not sure how that happened. And I use it with a cabled USB connection because using it with Bluetooth MIDI makes it even laggier and a little bit less reliable still. So while the app is probably just fine for controlling the piano settings at home, it could cause some frustration trying to use it during a performance unless you aren't changing many settings or voices while you perform. And something that I've always had in the back of my mind in general regarding keyboard manufacturers kind of replacing onboard UI features with apps. What happens a few years from now when a new version of iOS comes out that no longer supports the app, and you've got a performance coming up? How long does the manufacturer continue to guarantee supporting and updating an app for an aging keyboard? Having a more usable onboard user interface pretty much makes those concerns quite a bit less of an issue. Removal of the 1/8 inch audio import from the PX-S1100. So when Casio replaced the 1000 with the 1100, it now includes the WU-BT10 Bluetooth transmitter with the PX-S1100, which allows you to send Bluetooth audio to the piano when connected to the USB to device port. And as such, they removed the 1/8 inch audio import from the 1100. Now, I know I'm a little bit old school for preferring cable connections, which in my opinion are actually more dependable. Don't drop connections, that type of thing. But I do understand the appeal of going wireless. And since I am almost always streaming in backing tracks or drum beats or something when I practice, I have been using the Bluetooth audio on the PX-S1100, and it does work nicely. The one big issue, though, is that you cannot use that Bluetooth audio in at the same time as you record direct audio to a flash drive, because the Bluetooth transmitter is using the port. So not a huge gripe, but it would have been nice if Casio had just left it, the 1/8 inch audio in on the 1100, so that wouldn't be an issue. My last negative on the PX-S1100 has to do with having no way to specify a default setup when you turn the piano on. For example, I like to set the default touch sensitivity to lighter than normal. I have to set that every time I turn the piano on. In my opinion, that type of a setting should probably just be remembered by the piano anyways, by default, but it's not. So I looked into the auto resume feature to see if that would solve this issue, but not really any luck there. If auto resume is activated, then your piano will use whatever settings you had set when you last turned it off, which to me is kind of a useless feature. While it would remember my touch sensitivity setting, it would also set everything else up the way that it just happened to be when I turned it off, which may not have been, there might have been a strange combination of voices I was playing with or something. On my Casio Tone CTS1 keyboard, there's a feature called My Setup that is basically a registration that loads whatever settings you like, but you can specify that those settings are loaded when the keyboard is turned on. So I use that on my CTS1 to, by default, have the octave shifted down by 1, which is something I like to do on 61-key keyboards. Casio really should just enable the My Setup feature for the PX-S1100, because then that would solve any of the default setup issues. So that's my experience so far. Basically, I love the action. I really like the voices and the portability, but the user interface really isn't the greatest. And while the app does help with that for home use, I do have some issues with the app, and also about having to depend on apps in general for controlling your keyboard. So when I was in my local music store discussing some of this with the keyboard manager that I always deal with, he mentioned that with the release of the PX-S3100, that replaces the PX-S3000, that the PX-S3000s are going on to a significant discount, actually being priced less than my PX-S1100 was. And the PX-S3000 has the exact same action that I love. It has a menu screen and a much more usable onboard interface. It's nowhere near as slick a UI as you're going to get on an arranger like the Korg EK50 or the Yamaha PSR E-Series, but it's a massive improvement over the 1100. And it also has 700 voices, which include a stage piano patch that everyone I know who owns a 3000 raves about. That voice is not on the 1100. And it also has rhythms and accompaniment, and it has that 1/8 inch audio in port that I'm missing on the 1100. So I might be trying to work in a bit of a swap with him and see how that goes to snap up a 3000 before they're all gone. But stay tuned to the channel to see if that happens or if I just stick with the 1100. So I hope you found this video informative. If you enjoyed the content, please smash the like button and subscribe to the channel. That really does help me out. I will leave some links in the description below to my full review on the PX-S1100, as well as some Amazon links for you to check current pricing on the 1100, as well as the 3100 and the 3000. If you're considering one of these models, you really should keep an eye out on potential deals for the PX-S3000. You can check my Amazon links, but also check your local retailers as well. My retailer is currently selling the PX-S3000 for about $250 less than the 3100s and $50 less than the 1100. So in my opinion, that's a massive value. So thanks again for checking out the channel. Happy piano playing and happy piano shopping, and have an awesome day.